Hello, hello. How's it going, everybody? I feel like it's been busy lately. Um, I need a. I don't think it's just a summer thing, but breather would be great. But it is what it is. We are as planned, kind of new plan as of like a month ago. We're doing at the end of every month a Tauri Docs Day, and that means that we'll pick a specific thing to focus on or generically look at how the docs are doing. Last time we dug into the website implementation because we had just been updating similar code in previous streams. So we helped kick along an update there. And this time I think we're going to take a little look at permissions. I'm not quite sure how this is going to proceed or like what we do in the stream inherently. So it'll be a little bit exploratory. But the intent is that I've seen folks struggling with permissions, and I want to look at our current implementation of the docs, but also like what is there around it, or if there's issues or anything where folks have expressed that thought more deeply, and kind of look at what we could potentially do. Hi, come on. Kitty is come on. We'll see if Kitty wants to say hi today. Guess not. She just wants to lick my green screen. Drives me nuts. Hey, you. No, stop that. Come on. It's like the only. I mean, I guess it's not the only thing, but I don't understand why she likes to lick my green screen. Cats. Anyways, so we're doing docs today. We'll flip on over here, and I think we'll probably start looking at like what's the open issues, what's the open pull requests, and see if there's anything related to permissions specifically, and we'll probably kind of go from there. Here, let's go and go boop. All right, so we're going to look at open issues and PRs related question mark. And then from there, this might end up just being like generically an umbrella issue or something that we proceed with, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what information we can find. We might end up doing some like Google searches for it, and or I guess at this point, whatever search engine will give us decent information, because. But we'll see what we can turn up. See if we can get any more like concrete or specific. I don't know if complaints is the right word, but like specific indicators on like what is tripping people up, and we want to basically do our best to eliminate those things that are tripping people up, and that'll either be a docs or that'll be like looking at the API. So definitely not something that we're all going to get done today, but let's go over to. Ooh, what did I click on? I must have clicked on something here. Oh, these are all links. Oh, well, some of them are. That's kind of awkward. Okay, so actually last week we were doing stuff with AutoMerge. AutoMerge just updated, so that's what we still have open, and we were playing around with it, and we did get it all syncing all the way through, which was pretty neat. So I'm gonna close, and we are going to go to Tauri. Well, here first of all, new update got pushed out. So what we were working on stream, I guess last time for the Tauri Docs Day, we got that updated. That was in part because getting the plugin that handled the sidebar stuff working with this new setup was basically just allowed us to delete a bunch of code. um, so the more custom code that we had, the more we had to specifically maintain, and the more we had to have somebody that had knowledge of Astro and what has updated from version to version to be able to make those changes. But honestly, if you're using Astro and Starlight, I would prefer to just let the folks deep into it writing the plugins deal with those changes. So that's kind of what we did. Hi, you're back again. Coming up. Ooh, ah. Oh, kitty needs their nails cut. Ow, 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 that hurts. Come up. There she is. Okay. Ugh. Ugh. Goofy. All right. So let's go look at the docs. And she's gone again. Seriously? She literally hops up here, meows at me, and then runs back down and links my green screen. That cat, I tell you. Okay, let's actually look at the pull request real quick. There, I mean, we're getting to the point where we need to potentially I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of issues or a lot of pull requests here. Adding or reviewing all these is reviews take a while. So like, everybody, I feel like everybody is talking about AI lately. Generating the code doesn't, as at least in open source for the kind of stuff that I'm involved with, generating the code is not the problem. It's writing the docs and doing the reviews and making sure what gets in is not made up or wrong. Yeah. Anyways, and a whole bunch of these are old too, so we might just need to like come in here and spend some time calling at some point, because these are all like Simon was doing a bunch of different spikes and whatnot, and it has stalled out, it seems, which that happens. Yeah, Vitor is. I can kind of go either way on this. Bit of a side thought, but we have our docs in. I mean, honestly, this looks pretty decent. The problem is that when we do the type docs, we were trying to like shove it into Markdown so that we could then display it on the site. So if we go here, like we see JavaScript here, and then we got this. Like it's not awful, but also like it was clearly not made to work with what TypeJock is generating, because like this, just how it's laid out and how it's grouped is kind of nice. Okay, really, stop. All I see in the in the monitor as in like the thing that I can see my own screen. Ow, your nails. Oh my goodness. It's just because she's licking the green screen and the whole thing shakes. Stop licking that. I'm gonna have to. Come on. I do not understand the fascination with this. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I like including it, but we also completely punted on that idea for Rust. We're just using the Rust docs for it, which for the amount of projects and crates we have, again, like this also comes back down to like why we switched here. doing the custom thing was cool, especially when we had folks that had the time to spend on it. But honestly, I would prefer we spend time on making the content and spend time on updating the code. So like content isn't like the content in the docs. And if we have a system that's built to display it already, run with that. What do you got on your face? All right. Okay. Now Kitty's distracted and she's not gonna look at my green screen. We'll just do the I guess it's kind of like the evil villain thing. All right, so I don't see anything specifically around permissions here. We've got some random updates and stuff, a bunch of internationalization, PRs. This is like I mean, it's around the idea of permissions, but also like this is just generically a update on that piece of documentation. I don't see anything. So, well, I guess let's go look at the issues real quick. Let's just see if there's anything in here. And some of this too is we've got a lot of repos too. Like if folks are having trouble with this or struggling with this, it might actually show up in the main repo potentially too. Yeah, so like this kind of stuff, I think this is probably like we have in some places this documentation, but it's just not, it's more dynamic. So getting it in a place where we've documented it, but then also getting in a place where we've documented it and it shows up in a place where people are able to discover it, has proven difficult. So like if we look at our site, there's the capabilities, and we've got some core stuff here. But like this is more, this is more just like explaining how you put it together. And if we go over to like the references, configuration isn't inherently wrong, but then like you kind of have to know to go to the right spot. And like this is very generic. So what, like, where do I go from here? Like if I'm on security and I want to go, I guess here in, I guess so if we're on security and we're on the permissions tab in a capability, capabilities points to this. Capabilities here explains it. Please see a full reference of the configuration. Honestly, like this probably should just point to here, right? Because we got this whole other section. So that could be an updated link. But also like I think the permissions and the capabilities are important. It being grouped under security though might not be like, if I'm interested in doing something, I might be looking in the develop section or in the plugin section. And in here, it's going to explain how to use it. We get here permissions, and then like these permissions should be, I mean, we've got this. I think this is good. And this works for this plugin. Learn. I got hair all over me. Okay. Um. Hmm. So we kind of have this like. I think we have good information. Is kind of my feeling, but it's the problem is like permissions are kind of cross-cutting. Like you need them. They show up in a bunch of like contexts. They show up in just generically security. You want to sort of like close all the gates that you don't actually need open or are using. Just lock them. If you're not going to use it, keep it locked. Then you don't have to worry about folks using the gate that you're not expecting. Metaphorically speaking. And then each plugin, and then like there's also the core, has its own set of permissions. So like that is an additional complexity that I think is kind of required. I don't see a way we can work around it. And having some defaults is nice. And we need it documented somewhere. And this feels fine. But then, so it like we've got information for it, but it ends up being split between permissions, capabilities. There's also this learn section, which has its own security. Um, I mean, I don't. It feels weird that we've kind of like duplicated this. Like contextually, learn is different than the security section, but also like they kind of have similar information. The format is slightly different. Um, hmm. So this is specifically for plugins. It's security, as in like, um, for a specific use case. So this is a guide on how to use the plugin permissions. So when you add the plugin, you are considering default permissions, and then shows you how to test them potentially, and then it shows like what happens if there's an error. What's interesting is this does a so this is uses the TOML, and then it does a test from the web view doing a thing, and then we get the error actually in the terminal, right? And like I think the added complexity here too is that we had desktop and now we have mobile, and how you debug things on one versus the other is slightly different. So we could write how to debug it in a certain context, but then we also have another guide on how to debug it on the other context. It's this is in part why solutions aren't inherently a code only thing or a docs only thing. There's very likely going to be some of both. And depending on how you structure one determines how the other one is potentially valued and structured. So if you have a really good API, in theory, you don't need as much documentation, but also good API is sort of relative. Like there's some inherent bias or like depending on your experience, you might think that the API is more intuitive versus not. So like, I mean, even depending on what programming language you have the most experience with might determine if an API feels intuitive. But then the same issue shows up in the docs too. Like we can cat hair everywhere, I swear. If we write a guide and the guide ends up being a little bit more Rust based, those folks that are more familiar with writing the code for the web view, that will feel more involved. But at some point, like we don't want to have like 15 different docs, so you have to try to like piece together, and we have to make sure are written well to where they make sense and carry the documentation over between the different like approaches or like backgrounds that folks might potentially come from. So I think like in theory, I don't see any specific issues. I don't see like we have some docs. I don't see anything specifically jumping out at me as things we can improve inherently in our existing docs. Let's go look at the. I mean, I'll cross this off. We ended up doing a little bit more in the context of that. But let's look at the main repo issues, and we'll see if we find anything there. And then let's do we'll just say generically internet search. And we'll see, like I'm kind of expecting like Reddit or something like that might have some conversations that we might be able to pull some context from as far as like what specifically folks are struggling with. Because I think this is a thing that needs, like, to put it all in a metaphor, we have a rock climbing wall, like the thing you see at a gym or like a climbing gym, and we have handholds. We have a lot of them, which in and of itself might be intimidating. Because some of those handholds are more like, we've got two on the hall, two of them on the wall, but they're really hard to grip. But if you can use those two, and you can grip them fine, you can get to the top really fast. But then we have other options that are better grips, but we have more of them or something. And it takes a little bit more to climb the wall to get up to where you're going. But then at some point, if you have too many options, then folks have a harder time determining, like they basically have to figure out their route. I have this wall I need to climb, and now I have like 6 different options on how I can climb it. Like now there's an additional layer on top of it where like I need to figure out where to start even. So at some point, like you could almost have too much documentation. I don't know if I want to say that specifically, but like kind of, yeah. So I think I don't know that we're at that point, but we do sort of have like the same type of documentation in multiple places, in multiple contexts, which in theory should be helpful. But I do kind of wonder if we're suffering from the like, you need to know these exist. You need to potentially have a thing that points you to them, which we do have a little bit of that. Like if you're on the plugins page, we've got these links. So we might want to like double check these links or have some sort of standard that like this link points to a specific section, or this link points to a specific section or something. So we've got, permissions and capabilities are kind of I mean, they're kind of tied together. Like in theory, they could be a part of the same docs. And then so like command scopes is, um, I mean, it really is kind of the same thing. So I don't know if I'd reorder these. And we have some information here. So, like, if you want to learn about high level security stuff and you go there, that feels like it makes sense. The learn section here, tucked away here, maybe not so much. Okay, so considering that, if we go back to our metaphor, we have a wall of different handholds, different ways that you can climb up this wall, different approaches. Um, do we add another way to point people to the most appropriate option for them? Hmm. All right. Well, let's take a look at we'll take a look at the main repo issues. We'll do a quick internet search and see if we can see if we can get any information on what folks are struggling with, or how we could potentially help direct folks into the appropriate places to unstuck or unstick themselves. And I don't think we're gonna do a long stream today, unfortunately, um, for reasons. I got meetings and other stuff that keep coming up, but let's see what those turn up. Maybe we can get some indication on like direction that we can go with this. Um, okay, so let's look at the main repo. We're gonna go here and I guess we just search for permissions. I'm actually gonna look for both closed and open ones. Like this might be part of it. If I mean, like this is also a helpful context too. Yeah, and that like this is also part of it. It almost feels like we should have a some sort of like storage mechanism or way to like turn on a development mode to where it just tells you what permissions it has used in the process of you like clicking through and doing all this stuff. Like a permission recording tool or something like that. Because some of it is like when I'm doing dev, I don't really know exactly what permissions I'm going to inherently need, and then using the default is kind of a natural option, but also like if that starts throwing errors, then you go, well, I don't need to add this one and this one. And like interrupting that flow is kind of frustrating. But if you could have a list of all the capabilities that you used by the end of like a session or something like that, but just allow everything when you're doing development, that might be worthwhile. So in this case, they're doing a production build. So this might not specific. I mean, yeah, this doesn't feel specifically related to permissions. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, yeah, like And that, like, I think this is inherently the piece, is that folks try to do it, but then if you're constantly being interrupted by a permission that you haven't turned on yet, um, it's not the best experience. Yeah, and see, if you don't have the context to know where to put the thing or what you need to enable, every time you hit an error or it just like stops working, you need to know to go to that specific, like go to the console or go to wherever this error is hidden. And like that again changes based off the context. So like if you haven't specifically read through all the docs and you're just trying out a project and you're trying to add a plugin and you hit a permission error, now you're stopped. And that can happen for every plugin and everything you try. And if you enable all the defaults, that might be fine. You're potentially leaving things open if you're not using them. So there's sort of this like push and pull. You want flexibility when you're doing development, but also like getting blocked is frustrating. But also you just don't want to leave all these holes open when you actually go to production. So you need some way to like open all the gates, but then make sure they're all closed appropriately when you go to actually use it. So like when you're doing construction on a house, you're not so much worried about putting a door on it and making sure the door locks. I mean, there is some level of like, you don't want your tools stolen, but also if you're working in your local, there's some expectation that folks aren't going to be jumping the fence. And that's, if they are, that's a whole separate issue kind of. So like the walls are big enough that you don't have to worry about people stealing all your stuff. So there ends up inherently not being really a strong need to make sure your door locks. But when the thing is done and you're trying to sell it to folks, you do want to ensure that the door locks because they're going to be using it and they don't want their information stolen because somebody can walk in the front door. Yeah. And that's the, like inherently as a project, we don't want to be like, no, it's fine. Here's a switch to just allow everything. Like in theory, that is an option. Like from a technical standpoint, that is an option. But from a project stance, we don't want to enable that type of feature because then it, the classic, if you set a default, folks are just going to use the default and that's going to end up being, most like little use cases or trying stuff out or throwing things together will end up using the defaults. So having things secure by default is important. So like there's almost like a watch mode where you say, and I mean, honestly, maybe this is a way to move forward on this. I, in development, want to turn everything on, watch what I do. Anytime I use a permission, write it out to a file. I think part of the reason or one of the difficulties with that is that inherently we don't have a way to like monitor permission use. I don't believe there is a way. So we'd almost have to do a thing like if you get a permission error, it gets logged out or something. We have some other sub process or sidecar process running that anytime you hit a permission error, it basically just updates your capabilities and allows it. Because we have a lot of the docs, right? So it affects usability. Overly restrictive for legitimate use cases. But like, yes, in theory it is for like, I could see how folks could think this. but also like this is a little bit more qualitative, as in like there's some opinion behind this, like who determines what overly restrictive is. As a user, like I don't want you just opening all the doors and leaving them open in your program, but also like that probably happens already. But just because other systems or other builders or whatever are more open with permissions doesn't necessarily mean that we should be. So here's another, like, I'm stuck with permissions issue. Yeah. Okay. I mean, they just closed it. So I'm guessing what happened is they ran into this error. It wasn't immediately obvious how to fix it. And like they hit this error and were able to like trace it back to where they're through. So, I mean, maybe some of it is potentially updating these error messages. I wonder if, so, I've seen it in some other systems. Like some of this is potentially inherently like an SEO issue. If I see this error, how do I search for it? Or how do I like get back to the docs in the appropriate place? So like permissions associated with this command, that I don't know that it inherently like points me to looking in the security tab or looking in learn section. If you're just like using something off the shelf and you don't know that the shell is a plugin, you might not actually look in the plugins for that specific. I mean, in this case, they say they're using it. So in theory, you could potentially go to the plugins page and find this. And that might be actually what happened here. But I wonder if we do some like if we have short links, if we do a short link or something like that, can we point to, if you receive this error, basically a error message tying it to some sort of documentation? I wonder if that is also part of it. One of the things I really like about Rust is that it considers like poor error messages a bug. I like that conceptually because it pushes it towards like fixing the error messages as like a high like a high priority issue. But also like if you get an error message with Rust, you tend to see all of those error messages in a specific context that you're paying attention to. So you're running it in a terminal or you're running it in your IDE. And as soon as you like do something and it reloads or reruns or whatever, you get something saying that there's an error at this specific line of code. We have places where you can throw errors in Rust in the web view, and then that also changes mobile versus desktop. So like some of this might be high level. How do we handle error messages? Not that what we have with our error messages is wrong by definition, but like how can we improve the error messages to point people to the appropriate places where, like, if this error is thrown, how do I resolve it? And that could very much be resolved by giving somebody a direct link. Like if it is a specific situation or like a permission error, we could potentially point somebody at a specific permissions doc, which could then sort of be that entry point on like, if you've seen this error, these are the potential paths you could take to climb up this wall. So that might be one of the approaches. I think there's inherently like those two pieces. If I just take a project off the shelf and try it, or I'd run like create Tauri app, the thing I want to do is like get a quick thing out, like POC a thing, have something just be as secure as it can be by default. I don't want stuff blocking me, but if it does, I want to be able to resolve it quickly. And like having that as a baseline is something that I think ends up being quite appropriate for both folks just jumping in and trying to like try something out real quick, but also like if I've been writing a Tauri app and I hit an error, like if I've been writing a Tauri app for a year and I hit an error, I might know how to resolve it. But even still having a good error message and pointing to something or like even if I know this docs page exists, having the link there is just kind of really nice. Because then I don't need to like go track it down every time. And even if you've been like working on this project for a year, if you bring in somebody else on the team and they haven't worked with Tauri before, they're a little bit more junior. I don't know if I like that word, but they don't have the experience that you do working with Tauri and the docs, that you can just go directly to a doc page to get more information because you know that thing exists. Like if you don't know what you don't know, we need some way to point people to the place to unstick themselves from like, I don't know the thing I don't know. It kind of feels like those are the two ways we can like group these like folks talking about or running into issues with permissions error. And like some of it is so here like we have just a doc snippet. Mobile plugin development. Did they point to permissions? They pointed to plugin events. So like here is a snippet. You could potentially expect somebody to just copy this snippet and use it, but there's no inherent mention of permissions here. There is literally right above it, but like some of this too is so here, manifest permissions post notification. If we had a comment that says this thing here requires a permission, yeah, trigger camera preload. If we had a thing pointing to the permission section saying you need this needs permission, double check your capabilities, that could potentially be enough for this situation. But also like if you copy and paste this, this throwing an error should still direct you to like it doesn't inherently have to direct you back here. And I think this ends up being part of it is that like permissions ends up getting tied into everything. There's permissions in like every one of the plugins, and we have the core permissions. So like every time you write any piece of doc, you end up having to mention or touch on the topic of permissions. And it ends up naturally evolving into this big block of text that you need to give context to. But if you're doing that in every place, if folks are just scanning and they go, oh, this is the thing I need, copy paste, and it doesn't work. If you have this big thing that's talking about permissions, it's helpful, but also the bigger it is, the easier it is for folks to just scroll over it because it's too much to read. So I think there's some, like what's the best sort of push and pull on that? And it does feel like giving like a high level review of our error messages could be a potential path. And pointing to short links or pointing people to needing a specific capability or something like that. But it seems like even if you're aware of it, like this person, maybe they figured it out eventually, but like if I copy this and I miss a permission, at least when I'm in development mode, it does potentially tell you where to put the permission, but like you need to know potentially where to look for that error message. So like if you could just turn on, like I think what folks are actually asking for is just I care about permissions. I want it to be as secure as possible, but when I'm doing dev, I don't want to be interrupted every 5 minutes. You know, if I'm like trying to get a thing out real fast, I want it to be secure by default, but I also don't want to be interrupted because I missed the permission like on every little thing I do, which is fair. Because every time you touch permissions, you end up like reloading the whole process. So if we could just have a mode that like temporarily turns it on just for development and then records and updates your capabilities file, that could potentially fulfill the intent of what I think folks tend to be asking for. And like, I mean, so you need to know, you know, when you add a plugin, you do like we've got the plugin helpers to help you do some of this more automatically, but all the community plugins might not have that. And then you're needing to know that you need to like add it here, or there's, you know, I guess dynamic. Like this, having it statically done makes sense for those like everybody's going to use this sort of use cases. But if you have like partitioned pieces of your app, if you're only using part of it, you might not actually need the permissions for the other part of it. So if you're in like silo A, I don't need to inherently turn on the permissions for silo B until I go to use them. So having some sort of dynamic permission could potentially be helpful. So it's almost like we want like a log of like turn on all the permissions. Anytime we had to hit a permission error, write it out to a file so we know when and where it was accessed or something. But again, like this is, I mean, the things we've talked about are sort of error messages that could point to docs. Maybe some way we can have those docs then appropriately point folks to the thing that they, you know, that's preventing them from climbing out the wall. But then there's also the like, I want to get a thing out fast, but also just give me the enable the permissions that I've used that I care about. All of these tend to be very like high level overarching things. So in the concept of a single plugin, it's hard for that to affect or make any change because this is all like high level. You know, you'd have to make a change at a level above the plugin. It would need to be more holistic, effectively. Which, I mean, honestly, like, if it gets to the point, it could be a thing that this tweaking the structure or tweaking how something works ends up being a breaking change that would require a version 3. So that like it could very well be a situation where this ends up being a v3 feature. So like here's a permission error. So this is some like thing where it's downloading a model and you need a big capabilities. So like this makes sense. Well, then I guess that's the other piece too. You've got dev time and you got potentially build time, and like those permissions can sometimes be slightly different depending on how you use it. And if you're having something that's just recording all the potential capabilities that you might want, that means you have to touch every part of your app to get a full list of the potential capabilities they're using. So, I mean, even in some respects, having a way to statically analyze it to know what capabilities you're using could be helpful. Like, that very much feels like a V3 thing. Okay. Well, so I'm not seeing a lot of these feel like they're going to be sort of in that same vein. Um, and yeah, like, so here's the case of what we were just talking about. Dev environment seems to be fine, but after building, then this error comes up. So what could be considered a remote URL versus not might end up being different. So some of this is potentially in like the error message and it should actually be throwing an error. So shell.open doesn't throw an error when you're doing localhost maybe. Yeah. So dev URLs handles local source. So like slightly different context ends up being like slightly different errors and use cases. So like how it is very much like we need a high level approach, it feels like. All right. I think we'll do some internet searches real quick. It seems like a lot of these are in the same vein. Whoop, that was one we looked at already. So yeah, they used permission section. But again, like here, now that this is in develop mobile. So mobile plugin development. I guess same situation as the other one. This is the events plugin. They use this section. This is it is permissions and it is permissions specific to this. We don't actually link out to the overall permissions section, and like it doesn't really make sense to show all of the context every time in every place where it's used. So we need a way to, I think, improve that situation. So check permissions is not allowed. So they're doing something with a permission state. So they're missing they're missing some permission. And like if you look at this, it gives you a high level overview of like I mean, I guess here it's using check permissions and request permissions. So I think what Fabian was saying, that this permission here that you copy doesn't have everything that we need to do this. But again, like I don't think this is inherently a docs issue. It's almost like we're trying to give all the context every time where we use permissions, but like permissions are everywhere, and giving all the context every time is where we're going to miss stuff. Like ensuring that all the docs are always including all the information that you need for permissions is a tall order. Okay, so this is V1 versus V2. Yeah, I think a lot of them fall into this like, well, this might be a WebView specific thing. Did they resolve it? Yeah, this is the other thing. So like there's the Tauri permissions and how we've locked it down there, but then there's also like this kind of stuff. And this is actually different in mobile versus otherwise. So you need that because this is a WebRTC specific thing in the info.p list. So there's inherently the like permissions that the web view is expecting to have as part of a generic browser context. Those are going to have a potentially different permission profile than the ones that are like tied to plugins. The ones like tied to plugins or tied to the core are set up in a way where it isn't allowing the pieces that could have access to the full operating system actually have access to the full operating system. So like you're locking down the part that could have full access to the operating system because it's been given admin permissions. Whereas like this is entirely specifically in the web view. So I mean, this is a whole nother thing. Like it falls into the general it falls into the general umbrella of permissions. But if you go looking at the permissions docs, you're probably going to go down the wrong rabbit hole because this is a different type of permission. So that's another thing we should put a pin in too. We have permissions that are, that you fill in the capabilities, but then we also have permissions in the web view. And then desktop versus mobile app. So I suspect a bunch of those are going to be like that, where it's, we're going to see a bunch of these because getting it working in the web view, all the docs probably don't communicate that super well. So anytime you get this error, in theory, it's going to direct you into the right spot. Okay, so that is a little bit more like a cache issue. And this is potentially an issue related to this is July of last year. So like this is potentially an issue related to yeah. So let's do I'm gonna check off this one. Let's do a quick internet search, and then I think it's probably where we're gonna call it for the day. Let's see, Tauri v2 permissions. Some of these, so a bunch of these point to the v2, which I think is probably appropriate. And I think this looks like a good one to look at. I think for the SEO, we have it all point to a specific version. I mean, sure. And like this is the other thing. I don't want to basically I don't want to deal with permissions. Just open it from anywhere. What? And like this feels like a thing that I understand the intent, but then it's inherently going against the idea of like secure by default. And you can do this, but then also like we don't inherently want to encourage everybody to do it unless it actually makes sense for a specific use case. Hey Bogdan, good to see you. So let's take a look at these other couple ones here because this feels like one that I have opened up in the past, but let's just double check and see if there's any other ones from Reddit. So this is a more recent one. It seems like a lot of them are about, a year ago when our permissions setup was new and V2 wasn't like V2 wasn't actually out, or it was to the point where the docs weren't like super mature around um the permissions. Okay, that's not useful. Yeah, I mean, yep. Fair, but also yeah, I think this is kind of what's in some ways pushing VTOR towards looking at using just type doc directly. There's too much of the context that gets lost in that conversion process. But also, like all of this, so 6-9 months ago, so at the beginning of the year. Hmm. Um, I mean, at least we're getting this kind of stuff. Like if there's places we're gonna fall down, or I mean, inherently there's always going to be like nothing's perfect. Where everybody's doing as good as they can. But like if we're going to need to work in places, I would prefer that questions are well accepted, people are kind is the thing that comes, folks get out of it, even if they end up having troubles. Because like we don't inherently want we don't want the type of community that turns folks away or scares them away, because then they'll just never try it again. So even if we do improve the documentation, if we've turned people away, it doesn't matter. So accepting and understanding of the things that we can improve and helping out people and being good humans, uh, that at least sets the relationship up that they could come back in the future where they might then unstick themselves. Um, okay, that's sort of just yeah, and it again is so cross-cutting that you need all the documents everywhere every time, but then it's just so much that folks aren't gonna read that. So I think we need a good pattern in the docs to help push people in the right direction, but not like overwhelm them every time they, if you see permissions for the first time, we don't want to overwhelm them, but we want to like give them hooks to know I hit this error. Oh, I should actually come back to this and look at this thing that it told me I should look at. And some of that actually might show up in the examples where we need to say, hey, here's an example. Double check the permissions here, which honestly could go in every like copyable snippet at this point, honestly. This is a generic. Yeah, cool, but no servo. Yeah, I feel you. I feel you. Things are getting there. So yeah, so requirements changing, and now you have to like keep coming back to this to make sure that and this is, I think this is an old structure. This feels like an old structure. Oh, never mind. They're using V1. It is the old structure. Yeah, it's been moved. We want specific permissions. Okay, yeah. So that's all V1 stuff. No responses. Command not found. So this isn't a permission error, I don't think. Maybe. But this potentially falls into the command section. I wonder if can we point so error messages, potentially a thing we can do now if we have generic like high level error message that end up throwing and then just include context like this one. Command not found, I'm guessing, is just a generic part of the error message. Can we point to short links? So short links, that might be a quick, easy way to improve. Establishing a pattern for permission documentation in the places where we're not actually inherently talking about permissions. Yes, technically everything's touching in permissions, but you can't have all the permission documentation everywhere. So if we can have a snippet or a specific piece of text or like a learn more section or something like that, for anytime we need to talk about permissions that aren't in the actual context of talking specifically about permissions. So if you're looking at a plugin, yes, we need to see some mention of permissions, and a list of all the options is nice, but we don't need all of the permission documentation there. So having something that we can have as a snippet or a consistent pattern that we can place everywhere that then points to the appropriate doc if you need more information about that. And then allow all, but write it down for me so I can turn them on and lock it down at the end of the day is also another option. So that would be more in the code API type of side of things. I think that kind of covers the bits that I wanted to talk about. And honestly, like with those options, I think we have some places where we can do work now. I think we have some places where we can do work in like the midterm. I don't know if midterm is a good word. Feels too politics. In the near term, I think we have some options. In the slightly longer term, we have some options. And then in the maybe this ends up being a V3 type thing, we could potentially work through an API that would allow you to turn everything on for development mode, but then keep track of what capabilities you do need or you've used but aren't actually in your capabilities. So even if we have a session or something like that every time you could turn on a recording mode or something like that, where it records all the permissions that you've ended up using in the process of that. So some of that ends up potentially falling into the idea of observability and debugging in your actual app, which is potentially a whole separate topic. But honestly, it feels like from what I've seen folks talking about Tauri, it seems like performance issues on Linux specifically are a big pain point, and understanding and using the permissions are a big pain point. Those are the things that I've consistently seen come up, and folks have asked in the comments and the channel on Discord and issues. It seems to be high level the places that the project of Tauri could benefit the most from having additional effort thrown at it. I think that's kind of where we're going to kind of leave it. Again, we're going to be doing Tauri Docs days at the end of every month for the foreseeable future. I'm liking at least coming back to it on some sort of cadence. And what we actually do in the docs day and what we talk about is going to change. If you're watching this after the fact and you're interested in a specific topic, leave that in the comments and stop in the stream next time we do a Tauri Docs Day, and we can, especially if we're talking about that topic, feel free to ask live. We can potentially address some questions live. And I think this ends up potentially becoming a couple of issues that we see if we can dig into further. And we'll end up going from there. Maybe next time we do a Tauri Docs Day, this is one of the items that we specifically look at, or we look at specific items here. Especially if in the context of docs, I think that probably is the most near-term thing that we can play around with a little bit. But we'll leave it at that. So thanks for stopping by, y'all. Happy Tuesday. Have a great rest of your week, and next week, I think we're going to do jazz tools. I think I've looked at it enough that I think we could try it out next week. So if you're into local first, or you're interested in, or you've not heard of it before, stop in the stream next week. I'll see you then. Bye.